So the last video we did, we were breaking down deadlifting step by step, giving you guys a better idea of what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, some things that you should be looking out for, some things that you should be careful with, and some minor corrections to make in your form. Similarly, today we are going to be talking about squat in the same manner. As we're going through, you're going to see that a lot of the technique and form focus points that we're going to talk about today are very similar to the ones that we were focusing on and looking at when we were doing deadlift, but there are also a lot of differences that are really important. So we're going to make sure that we break these down as simple and easy for you guys to understand so that we're all on the same page. So as we go through today, what we're going to talk about first is going to be our foundation, because a house is only as strong as the foundation that you build it on. So we're going to start off with our foundation, and in the squat, that is going to be our feet, our foot placement, the way that we're distributing the weight in our foot. So that is going to be our first talking point and one of the most important talking points. So starting off with our feet, we are going to first talk about placement and distance for the feet. First things first, I want my feet to be about shoulder width apart, right? So if I drop down my hands on my side, that's about right here, right? So I'm going to spread my feet just a little bit, and about right here is shoulder width apart for me. Now, when we talk about foot placement, different people will angle their feet in different spots when they squat, and it really depends on what's comfortable to you, right? So for me, I do a parallel approach because that's what feels comfortable for me. For some people, they'll turn their heels a little bit inwards. This allows them to get a little bit of a deeper squat. It really just depends on your anatomy and what feels good to you. But starting off, I usually recommend that people act like you're standing on some train tracks, right? We're keeping the feet parallel with each other and we're keeping them straight. And then obviously that's going to be perpendicular to the bar. Now, the next very important talking point is going to be weight distribution through the foot. So what I mean by that is, when we're squatting, we want to make sure that we are applying weight in the appropriate spots of our foot. A lot of the time, when you see people squat, they'll be placing too much weight in their heel on the back of their foot. And when they get to the top of their squat, they'll come up and you'll see their toes come up off the ground, right? And this is demonstrating a lack of balance and instability in the lift, right? Because they have all of that weight distributed on the back of the foot. And then you got to worry about falling backwards, losing your balance, and many other problems. Same thing on the other side. If you see people that they'll distribute too much of their weight in the front of their foot, their heels will come up when they're at the bottom of their squat, usually due to a lack of ankle mobility and things like that. But either way it goes, it's creating instability in our lift, which means danger for us. We want to make sure that our feet are almost suction cupped to the ground, and that at every point in our lift, your foot is completely flat against the floor. The way that we're doing that is we're distributing the weight through what we call a tripod foot, right? 3 points. So essentially, what we're doing is these 3 points being the heel of your foot and the 2 balls of your feet are going to be where you are evenly distributing the weight through the foot. And I'm going to go ahead and throw up a pretty little picture on the screen. There it is. So those 3 points are the 3 points that you want to be distributing your weight through the entirety of the lift. All the way on the way down, as well as all the way back up. And while we're doing this with a barbell and weight on our back, it's going to be even more important that we're evenly distributing the weight, right? Because if we're just doing, let's say, a body weight squat, for example, if we're going down and we're squatting and we don't have the weight evenly distributed on our foot, if I was to lean too far back or lean too far forward, it's a pretty easy correction. However, if you have weight on your back, it's not going to be that easy of a correction, and now you risk serious injury. So we're going to make sure that we're distributing the weight evenly, right? And as we do that, we want our feet to be nice and flat on the ground. Like I said, you want to imagine that your feet are completely suction cupped to the ground from heel to toe. Next, we are going to talk about our knees, right? We've established our foundation. We're going to move our way up. Next point of failure, most common, is going to be the knees. Super important. So as we're going through and we're squatting, some of the things that you want to think about is ideally to get your knees to go in the direction that your toes are facing and get your knees over your toes. Now, the way that we are going to ensure that we are doing that is as we are squatting down and as we are coming back up, you want to control the direction that your knees are facing, because controlling that direction that your knees are facing is going to, in turn, engage the knees, right? We want to keep your knees and all of the surrounding muscles engaged. So what we're going to do is imagine that you are taking your knees and you're going to turn them outwards. So when I'm standing up, this is where my knees sit. This is where they naturally fall. This is where they naturally align. If I'm squatting with my knees slightly turned inward like this, I risk, with weight on my back, I risk my knees buckling and turning inwards. And you'll see a lot of people do this, even people who've been squatting for a really long time. They'll come down with the weight and they'll get as low as they can, and on the way back up, you'll see their knees buckle inwards. And that is a lot of instability and danger right here. So we want to make sure that what we're doing, we are taking our knees and we are turning them outwards, almost opening up the hips a little bit, but we're engaging the knees, we're engaging all the surrounding muscles, and we're turning outwards. So this is knees falling regularly when I'm standing, and this is knees turns outwards. Regular stance, knees turn outwards. So before I begin the lift, I'm going to turn my knees outwards while making sure that my feet remain suction cupped to the floor, glued to the floor. I'm turning my knees outwards, and this is going to give me that stability and muscle engagement that I need, so that way as I'm going down and coming back up, my knees are staying engaged at all times and my surrounding muscles are staying engaged at all times, giving me more stability and preventing those knees from collapsing inward and having that energy leakage and that risk for danger. So we talked about what the knees should be doing, right, and how we should be engaging the legs. The next thing we're going to be talking about is the hips and the way that they should be moving. Often when a lot of people think about squatting, what they focus on is trying to get their bottom as close to the ground as they possibly can. Often when they do this, they put themselves in a bad position, especially if they don't have really, really good ankle mobility, right? The way that we want to think about it is, rather than dropping our behind as low as we possibly can, we want to think about that we are taking our hips and extending them outwards. As we're doing this, we are still proceeding to bend our knees downwards, right? So that way, instead of just thinking about coming down this way, I'm taking the hips, I'm moving them outwards. At this point in time, I'm going to have the weight bar on my back to support. I am engaging my quads and I'm tightening up my core. As I'm doing this, I'm pretending that there's a wall behind me. I am taking my hips and I am shooting them back towards that wall. As I'm shooting them towards that wall, I am also bending my knees. I'm doing this slow and controlled, and while I do that, I am engaging my posterior chain. My hamstrings are going to light up. I'm going to get nice and deep, and then I'm going to come back up. But so again, the way that we're thinking about that is not so that I'm just trying to drop my bottom as close to the ground as possible, but that I am taking my hips, shooting them backwards. As I shoot them backwards, I'm bending my knees and trying to keep a nice neutral spine as much as possible. This is all going to depend on your anatomy. But as I get to the bottom, I'm going to then drive my hips back forward. A lot of people, you'll see when they get to the top of their squat, they'll do a big squeeze. We don't want to be super exaggerated about it, right? Because the second that I shift my hips too far forward, all that weight is being caught in my lower back. But we're going to come up, engage as we come to the top, driving with the quads, driving with the hamstrings, driving with the glutes. Then once we get to the top, we're going to do big squeeze, nothing overly exaggerated, right? We don't want to see any of this. That's way too much. Slow and controlled, big squeeze up. But the big thing is going to be the hips, shooting back towards the wall till we get to that point where it feels good to us. Again, it's going to depend on everybody's anatomy. How low you're able to get is also going to depend on your mobility and things like that. But once we get to the bottom, we're coming back, shooting the hips back forward. So we've talked about the feet, we've talked about the knees, we've talked about the hips. Now it's important that we talk about the core. Your core is going to make or break your squat. Similar to the deadlift, if your core is not engaged appropriately the way that it should be, or if your core just can't handle what you're trying to do, what's going to catch all the slack for compensation is going to be your lower back. We want to avoid lower back pain by any means possible, right? Your core is going to be a huge piece of that. So as we talk about bracing the core, what's most important, right, is that when we think about bracing the core, imagine that you are about to sneeze, where you take that deep breath and you that press down before you sneeze. You can also think about that somebody's going to punch you in the stomach and you are trying to prepare for that hit that's coming towards you, right? Or something that also might be a little easier for people to understand is that if you're using the bathroom and you're having a hard time and that
bearing down sensation, right? You're pushing with the core. So essentially you want to tighten the core as much as possible. The way that you're doing that is you want to draw your core in, right? So we're taking our belly button, bringing it in close towards our spine. Now, as we brace down, the mistake that you want to avoid is some people, what they'll do is they'll take a deep breath and they'll extend their belly out and brace this way. So when they go to brace, it'll look like this. They'll go, and they'll push down as hard as they can with their belly extended out that way, right? So we don't want to do pregnancy belly bracing, right? We're not trying to extend out this way when we brace. We're instead trying to breathe laterally. So instead of trying to expand this way, I'm trying to expand this way, outwards. So essentially what that is let's say that this is my waist, right? This is my core here. Rather than trying to breathe out this way, which would push my fingers outwards, I'm instead trying to expand laterally, which is going to push my hands farther away from each other. Easier said than done. A lot of it's going to come from engaging the obliques as well as making sure that you're drawing in your belly button nice and close to your spine, or as close as you can get it to your spine is a good way to think about it. And then from here, you're going to do a tight squeeze to build up as much pressure as you can in that core. And having that strong core and that good core stability is what's going to save your lower back from trying to pick up the slack. And then you putting a lot of weight in that area that doesn't need to be in that area, right? Because the second you stop embracing your core, now you have a lot of energy leakage in your back, which is what we're trying to avoid. Bracing the core is going to be the biggest part of that. So we're going to imagine that I'm under the bar. So as I'm under the bar and I'm in my good position, right, I've already established all of my other elements that we talked about earlier. From here, I got the bar on my back. Before I go down, I'm going to take a deep breath. Once I got that deep breath, I'm going to brace my core, right? I'm going to bring my belly button towards my spine, and I'm going to expand my abdomen laterally. I'm going to tighten my obliques, and I'm going to get as wide as I can laterally. Obviously, a little bit of movement, right, forward is okay, and that's fine. Just due to anatomy, that's something that's possibly going to happen. That's not a big deal. You just want to avoid that exaggerated big bloating forward, right? Because then we're losing that tightness and that pressure that we're trying to build. We want to keep it all as condensed as it can possibly be. If your core cannot handle the weight that you're trying to do on squat, your lower back is going to let you know very quickly. So before we talk about what the back is going to be doing, we're going to talk about bar placement itself. Once we have bar placement itself down, which is pretty simple, pretty easy, we'll then go on to what the back should be doing in relation to the squat. So first things first is going to be bar placement. So when I am coming up to a bar, what I want to make sure is that the bar is even centered in the middle of whatever squat rack that I'm using. Sometimes people will go to put the bar down and they'll have it uncentered, where I have a bunch of the bar hanging off this way and a little bit of the bar close to the rack this way. So I want to make sure that my bar is nice and even centered in the middle of the squat rack first. From here, which is completely personal preference, but if you want to start off the way that I do, that's completely fine. From here, what I do is I find where the grooves begin on the outer edge of the bar, which for me is also close to shoulder distance apart. So from here, what I'm going to do is I take my thumbs and I line up the very tip of my thumb on exactly where that groove starts on the bar. Once I have my thumbs fully extended and the tips of my thumbs are on the groove of the bar, I then wrap my hand around the bar, and this is about where I'm going to grab. There are different markings on the bars. You can grab wherever's comfortable to you. The biggest thing is going to be making sure that your hands are even. So if I have one hand right here, I don't want to have my other hand right here, and now I have more side of the bar on this way than I do on this side, which obviously means more weight is going to be on this side, and I'm going to be uneven. So making sure that wherever I put my hands, I am centered on that spot, and my hands are equal distance from each other from the center of the bar. From here, I am then going to approach the bar, and I'm going to get up under the bar, and we're going to switch to a back view so that you guys can see the placement on my actual back itself. So here's that view from the back. So I'm going to line up my hands, line up the very tip of my thumbs with where that groove starts on the bar, and I'm going to extend my thumb all the way outwards, and then I'm going to wrap my hands around the bar. From here, I'm going to approach the bar. I'm going to bend my knees, get myself under the bar. From here, I'm making sure that I'm placing the bar on my traps. What you see beginners do, and it looks extremely painful, I assure you that it is they'll place the bar way too high. You never want to put the bar on your neck at any point in time. You're just asking for a terrible injury, right? So I'm going to get the bar a little bit lower. I'm going to get the bar on my traps, right? I want them to be sitting on the top of my traps. Some people will sit them a little lower on the traps. It's up to you. I like to keep them at the top of my traps because it's what feels the most stable for me. Then from here, I'm going to take my wrist and I'm going to rotate them to make sure that my wrist is in a good neutral position. Because as I'm lifting the weight, I don't want my wrist to be like this, right? I don't want it to be broken because then I have energy leakage right here and all that weight is on these small bones in my wrist. I want to make sure that I'm keeping my wrist in a neutral position so that it's distributing that weight all throughout instead of pinching right here at that tiny point, right? So neutral position for the wrist, distribute the weight all the way through. And one more time, here's that a little bit closer so that you can see where I'm placing that. Coming under, I'm placing it back here on my actual trap itself, not up on my neck, which is a danger, but I'm placing it on the top of my traps, almost on the tops of my shoulders, right? Right there. And that's what feels good to me. So now that we established our actual placement on the bar, let's talk about what the back should be doing while we're squatting. So while we're squatting, essentially what we want to do is we want to make sure that our back is as stiff and as locked in place as possible, right? So what we're going to do is once we get under the bar, essentially the way that you're going to think about it is that you are taking your lats, right? And you are locking them down to bring the bar into your traps, right? To get you nice and tight and prepared for the lift. While you do this, it's super important that you're engaging your core the entire time. Because if I'm locking myself back, right, and I'm only focused on bracing my back and getting my back tight, what people will start to do is they'll start to arch the back, right? Because they're so worried about making sure the back is really tight, but they're not engaging the core, so they'll start to arch the back. You have to keep your core appropriately engaged to make sure that you're not arching the back, right? That core is what's going to keep you forward and that spine in a good neutral position, right? Rather than arching that back. But so what we're going to do is we're going to bring the lats down and pull the bar into our traps. And then from here, we're going to bring our shoulders back. We're going to squeeze the traps nice and hard, right? As we're doing this, we're making sure, like I said, that we keep the core nice and engaged. The obliques are engaged. Everything is tight and ready to go. And then from here, we're in this nice locked, stiff position, and we're moving forward with the rest of the movement. So we're going to come through under the bar. I got the bar placed on my traps, and I'm going to rotate my wrists, right, to make sure that my wrists are in a good position. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to take a step back. And as I do that, I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping my core engaged and keeping my back nice and tight. But I want to make sure that my back is tight before I even get to that point, right? So once I'm under the bar, my wrists are rotated to make sure that my wrists are nice and neutral. From here, I'm pulling the bar into my traps. I'm pulling my lats down, and I'm squeezing my back nice and tight while engaging the core. Then I'm going to come up. And once I come up, my back is completely locked and stable in this position. Then from here, I proceed with my squat. So first things first, I'm going to come up to the bar. I'm going to make sure that the bar is even in the squat rack and that I am centered in the bar. From there, I'm going to make sure that my feet are about shoulder width apart because that's what's comfortable for me. And I'm going to make sure that my feet are train track style, right? They're parallel to each other and perpendicular to the bar. From here, I'm going to make sure that I am evenly distributing my weight through the through the two balls of my feet and through my heel. I'm making sure that my weight is evenly distributed. I'm going to make sure that my knees are fired and appropriately engaged, and then that I'm turning them outwards, very slightly opening up the hips, right, to keep all of my surrounding muscles engaged, to get my quads engaged, to get everything turned on, to get me in a good position, right? I'm going to grab the bar, making sure that my thumbs are lining up with the outer groove, right? And I got my thumbs fully extended before I grab the bar. From here, I'm going to come under the bar. I'm going to place the bar on the top of my traps because that's what's comfortable for me. From here, I'm going to make sure that my wrist is rotated into a nice neutral position. From here, I'm going to go ahead and stand up, and I'm going to take a step backwards. At this point, my core is nice and tight. It's engaged. My obliques are engaged. I'm bracing appropriately, and I'm breathing laterally to spread as laterally as I can. I'm going to make sure that my back, my lats are pulled down, my traps are engaged, everything's engaged. From here, I'm going to then shoot my hips backwards, making sure that I'm still driving my knees outwards so that we're preventing any buckling of the knees. I'm going to shoot my hips backwards while I'm keeping everything nice and tight. Shooting my hips backwards as I bend my knees and lower, get close to the ground, trying to keep my spine in a nice neutral position, keeping my knees pressed outwards as I go. I'm still keeping tension on the outside. On the way back, I'm shooting my hips back forward and making sure that my quads are engaged, my glutes are firing up, and my hamstrings are also engaged. Here's what that looks like from the back.
You be having the simplest conversation in the street, everybody knew that he was good except for Jay. Jay doesn't know Garcia like we do. So I go Garcia, ride with Jay so I can ride with Samontes bought the truck. So I was like, ride with the Montes. Ride with Jay so I can ride with the Montes so I can check out his truck and like catch up with Selena Montes. I've been on baby leave. He was like, all right. And he's in the car with Jay and we get there. Jay's like, fuck you. I'm like, what? He's like, Garcia's been screaming at me every 5 minutes. The entire